Hi, I'm John Hawley with Purdue University Extension, and this is the Nature of Teaching program Food Waste Curriculum. We're going through the What a Waste of Food lessons, and this is lesson number 2, Pick on Me. This is a really fun lesson that's going to teach your students obviously about food waste, but it's all going to focus on what they like to taste, what they like to eat, what they like to pick on. So to get started, I've already explained a little bit about this lesson, but really this lesson is going to teach your students about their eating habits and how it contributes to the broader food waste problem. There's a couple different vocabulary terms that will be great to start out with as you begin this lesson. One is a super taster. A super taster, as we'll talk about even more here in a minute, is a person who experiences a sense of taste with a far greater intensity than others. The next vocabulary word is ugly food. We'll talk plenty about ugly food, and that is food that is not perfect in size, shape, or color. Also like this squash right here. So this lesson has an estimated time limit of about 30 minutes, give or take. The required materials, I've already shown you a few. Small pieces of interesting or exotic fruits. Believe it or not, some of your students may not be very familiar with squash and zucchini. And I took kind of an ugly one out of my garden here. Good example for the next piece of required material, which is 3 to 4 small pieces of ugly foods. So not only misshapen foods like this likely poorly pollinated squash, but also older overripe bananas. I've got an overripe peach right here. You'll also want to pick a few different pieces of small, pretty food. So I brought a very nice fresh apple right here. Would be an example of a food that looks so pretty, what you would see on photo stock images of grocery stores. You also want to have one food journal per student, just a basic binded folder. You can do cardstock stapled together, things put into a binder, loose leaf paper, etc. One good writing utensil per student. One interesting thing in this lesson is the use of a PTC paper. I actually didn't have any around the office today when I'm preparing for filming this lesson, but this is what it looks like. You can order it online. We'll talk more about the PTC paper here in a minute. One pair of latex-free gloves, and one blindfold, which should be pretty easy to find. You can use a nice bandana. The blindfold works really well for the activity. So, to start this activity, the actual procedure you can see on page 19 of your teaching guide. Tell the students your favorite foods. Do you like apples, oranges, carrots, celery, etc.? And then ask them what their opinions are on food. The whole purpose of the lesson today is to find out what they do like, challenge their willingness to try more, and then see at the end of the lesson what they may be willing to try in the future. Introduce that term super tasters. So a super taster is someone who has that accelerated sense of taste. So the way that we're going to do this, the way that you're going to do this throughout the lesson is by using that PTC paper. You're going to very safely have your students try putting their tongue to the end of the PTC taster, which is just a small little strip of paper about the size of a, kind of like a strip of Post-it note. And if they can taste bitterness, they're a super taster. If they don't taste anything at all, they're an average taster. Make sure to tell your students there's no good or bad. If you're a super taster, great. If you're not, that's fine. Keep the tally of super tasters in your classroom on the board just for reference throughout the lesson. And then just explain to students, some people are going to like squash. Some people are going to like pumpkin puree. Some people are going to like this pie or that pie, this candy, that candy. We have different taste buds. That's the whole purpose of this lesson. So I walked you through the taste test, but really walk the students through how they're going to taste different foods today. And you're going to use your exotic pretty foods, your ugly foods, to have the students try different things. So before you begin the activity, prepare your pretty and ugly foods and exotic veggies by cutting them up into small bite-sized or tryable pieces and putting them securely away in like a Ziploc bag or a little nice Tupperware container. Keep that in the fridge if need be. This activity is, like I said, going to challenge students to try new foods. So make sure to tell them that they are not to pass judgment on a food before trying it. Make sure, as a precaution, to check with parents, guardians for any allergies beforehand. That's always a good idea. I think there's a reference to that in your teacher's notes on page 5 of your teacher guide. But yeah, you'll cut that food up, and then make sure to tell your students not to pass the judgment on the food, but also not to judge their fellow students. Maybe they like the squash, but you don't. Well, don't pick on them either way. We're picking on the food, not each other. So make sure each student has their food journal, and then pull out the examples of pretty and ugly foods. And then have 3 or 4 students come forward. You're going to blindfold them, and this is step 2 in the activity right here I'm reading along with. Have each student try one pretty and one ugly version of each of the foods that you've cut up and prepared. But make sure the students are blindfolded, and also make sure as you're teaching this lesson to tell your students in the audience not to make any reactions as to give away the food. That would ruin the whole purpose of the blindfold and having the students try those new foods. Keep a tally on the board of how often they were correct or not on guessing the foods, whether it was a pretty or the ugly food, and have them record some of those notes from their observations in their food journal. Think of the students in the audience watching the others as researchers, understanding, oh, hey, Tony over there, all right, he tried the ugly banana, but he liked the right banana. I'm going to make a note of that. But all these people, maybe your students will make the assessment that more of the girls liked the ugly food or more of the boys. You know, it's the science of it, allowing the students to better understand not only the food waste in general, but how we taste things and how we desire things as humans when it comes to eating. And have those recorded in the food journal. You're going to pass around those samples of the interesting foods that you've cut up. Make sure all the students try the food at the same time so they don't give it away, because maybe Tony tries something first and Tony doesn't like it. Well, then that may lead the rest of the class to be like, oh, I don't want to like it if Tony doesn't. So make sure they all try it, record notes in their food journal, and then challenge them. Did you like it? Would you try it again? It's a really interesting way to have the students learn more. Focus on the senses in this lesson. How did it smell? Hey student, did the food smell bad to you? Did it smell sour, acidic? And have them record those notes in their journal. What did the food feel like? Focus on all of those senses. And then that is the majority of the lesson there. Really focus on that term super tasters, and then focus on ugly food and how in the whole food waste process we're trying to reduce food waste in general. So if a food's a little overripe, it might still be good. Ask them if they're willing to try new foods because this activity in the future. Ask if they will be less likely to throw away foods because they're not pretty. And then focus on those sort of questions and subjects. So I hope you enjoyed this lengthy version of the instruction for Pick on Me, lesson number 2 in the What a Waste of Food guide for the Nature of Teaching Food Waste curriculum. Once again, I'm John Hawley with Purdue Extension. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the box below. Thank you.